Welcome to the Crunchy Moms Unfiltered, the podcast where we question everything and say the things no one else will. I'm April Locani, a serial entrepreneur turned naturopathic practitioner and just a truth-seeking mama.
And I'm Brandy Lemire, a social media influencer, a certified nutrition response practitioner, and just a crunchy mom who's done with censorship and refuses to co-parent with the government. April and I built this podcast as a safe space for moms and dads to have real, raw, uncensored conversations.
From what's really in our food to the truth about modern medicine, we're diving deep into the topics no one else wants to touch because an informed mom makes empowered choices.
No filters, no fear, just real, raw talk. Welcome to Crunchy Moms Unfiltered.
Welcome, guys, to Crunchy Moms Unfiltered. Today's episode we have been waiting for so long. We're sitting down with Bigtree, creator of An Inconvenient Study, An Inconvenient Study, not Inconvenient Study. And it's one of the most controversial voices in medical freedom. So welcome to our show. This conversation is going to be raw, unfiltered. We have so many amazing questions. And I know that we wanted to jump right in to why we got here. A little bit of the beginning of why we got here, originating back to years ago.
So I might cry. Like this is one of the, I'm already starting to cry. This is one of those like huge full circle moments for me. So those of you that have been following me for a long time will know I'm very loud about vaccines. That's actually what made us start the podcast. We tried not to start it. We're still figuring out all the things and learning all the things, but I was so censored on social media because of the things I was talking about. And 10 years ago, I was that normal mom who listened to everything my doctor told me. I vaccinated myself, my children. I gave them antibiotics like candy every time the doctor told me to. I didn't think to question anything that the medical system was telling me. And so I had my third baby, who will be 10 years old this summer. And same thing, I got vaccinated while I was pregnant. That's a whole nother story for a whole nother day. But I vaccinated her on the schedule. And after her 2-month appointment, she was injured. And I didn't even know what that meant. I didn't know. I thought moms who didn't vaccinate were crazy and reckless. I have Facebook posts that pop back up where I was like poking fun at those anti-vax moms. Like, y'all, very full circle for me. And so I have this 2-month-old baby who had an injury. We're very blessed. It wasn't worse than it was. But the night of her shot, her leg was swollen and red. She had the scream for hours, which I now know is brain inflammation. I couldn't touch her. I had to lay her on the bed and dangle feed her. I was nursing, obviously. In the picture that comes up every October, I gave her Tylenol. I had the Tylenol syringe next to her head. Like, I did everything the doctor told me. Week later or so, she develops eczema. She starts getting ear infections, which I treated naturally. And I thought something was wrong, but the doctor was like, nope, that's normal. It's normal. There's nothing wrong. They convinced me to give her 4-month vaccines. We had a similar incident. The eczema got worse. She developed a lazy eye. I had to patch her for like 6 months, more ear infections. And that's what led me down starting to ask questions. And so I remember going into a mom's group on Facebook, a judge-free mom's group, and saying, I think my newborn had a reaction to vaccines. I don't even know if that's a real thing, but something's wrong. And they deleted my post and told me, you can't talk about vaccines here, but we can introduce you to one of those moms, like one of those crazy moms who don't vaccinate their kids. And that woman, her name is Megan. She was incredible. She held my hand virtually, and she sat me down with books and documentaries and inserts and all the things. And VAXXED was one of the first things she had me watch, was VAXXED 1 and VAXXED 2. And I remember sitting there holding my baby sobbing. I'm going to cry. I keep saying that, but sobbing like, oh my gosh, what did I do? And then I never vaccinated again. I then looked back at my older children's vaccine records and found correlations between every single vaccine appointment and sickness and, the flu shot and flu. And I felt so bad. And that mom's guilt and all the things. And so I deep dove into vaccines. I created my platform to be a space where parents could always come and ask questions and seek information. And 10 years ago, the information wasn't out there like it is now. Full circle, my daughter's names are on the VAXXED bus, which is just amazing. Bigtree has been a huge unknown mentor to me. He didn't know how much I was watching him or looking up to him over the last 10 years, but he really shaped my journey and who I was as a mom trying to be there for other moms. I'm so emotional. I just moved back from Florida and I used to speak at like delegation meetings and school board meetings, and it's hard to tell this story still 10 years later without crying. So I'll turn this over to you. I wanted to preface why we're here and why we're having this conversation. And we are so honored to be having Del Bigtree as a guest on this podcast today. It literally is like the biggest full circle moment ever.
Yes, we're excited to have you, as you can tell. I was down early. We'll share my story a little bit later, but it was way later in life. And I want to know, who were you before all this? What led you down this path?
It's a good question. I mean, when I get asked, how did I get into this? The truth is, I really go back to how my parents parented me. I was very lucky to have very conscious parents that took, raising me and my brother and sister. I was the oldest of three. My mom especially took that job very seriously, and they were. My mom was a crunchy, original granola mom, hippie from 1960s, marched in Chicago. So I was raised a little differently. Our heroes were like the Chicago Seven. My parents told me to always stand up for what was right against authority. So they had sort of that rebellious 1960s. I was born right in that. If you think the summer of love is 1969, I was born in 1970. So that's a huge part of it. My mom didn't vaccinate me. We were all natural health, natural healing. But my life, I ended up wanting to be a filmmaker and found myself in California. And it was just by, I guess I feel like destiny, really. But I ended up on a crazy trajectory with my career. Instead of making films, my first job was on the Dr. Phil show. I got a job sort of being a backup camera guy. And then I started producing for Dr. Phil. And then Dr. Phil created this medical talk show called The Doctors. And I was the first one ever out in the field as a camera operator and producer, going into ORs, into surgeries. We were trying to figure out how to make surgeries, legal to put on television. Like, how much can we show? I was in there from the very beginning. So, we created the first ever medical talk show. So there was a real irony. My mom would call me and say, "What are you doing working on a medical talk show? You've never been to a doctor in your life." As fate would have it, like that, I really got into it, actually. And I loved working on The Doctors. And I ultimately ended up being one of the top producers on the show. We won an Emmy Award with the show. And I started really getting into reading medical journals and trying to understand the science and medicine. And honestly, like, I think, and I didn't think of myself as, super smart. I'm not dumb, but I hated school. I just wanted to be out making movies and things like that. And suddenly when I was starting to prepare for these episodes I was pushing the envelope of what that show was capable of. I was challenging medical establishment, asking why, if there was a story about a drug that had been recalled, I didn't just want to announce it was recalled. I wanted to know how it got approved in the first place, and was digging in and really how was that on the market so long? What did they finally discover? So not really being friendly towards the medical establishment, but actually challenging it. I think that's why my shows were rated so high. There's about 6 other producers on the show. I was responsible for 1 episode a week. But ultimately, I had a great interview with Zach Bush a couple years ago. I don't know if you know who that is, but he told a story. It was similar to mine. I was at a certain point, I was reading a medical journal to do a very complicated story. And I just was so into it. I was like, I wish I could go back to my 18-year-old self and tell him, you're not going to be Steven Spielberg. You're actually going to be reading medical journals in your future. And I think, if I'd have been born to any other family, I probably would have been a doctor and gone to med school. It all sunk in a way and felt so natural to me. It was so easy to understand. It sort of surprised me. I always joke, I'm like Wayne Gretzky, the greatest hockey player, only I was born in Kenya, so I never saw any ice. Being born to a natural health family, it wasn't my trajectory to be a doctor. So anyway, all that said, the investigation I got into, finally when through a crazy set of circumstances, I found out about a whistleblower inside the CDC while I was working at the doctors, and that they were saying that they were committing scientific fraud in the vaccine safety studies. And of course, I pursued that and made the documentary VAXXED, which changed my life forever.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, it's an amazing experience. It's an amazing ride to be on. We're celebrating 10 years now since really starting our nonprofit, which was sort of born out of VAXXED. But one of the things I want to say about, you know, your story that you told is that it's something people don't really realize. They call us anti-vaxxers, especially people like you. They call you an anti-vaxxer. But the truth is you're not alone. It's not rare that you can go back on your Facebook and, you know, and see yourself ridiculing and lambasting people that are vaccinated. That happens to be the majority of people that are now called anti-vaxxers, which is why I think the term should really be ex-vaxxers.
Right.
People that absolutely not only went along with it, tended to be very passionate about, you know, the program, and anybody that's not doing it must be crazy until it harms your own child or children. Oftentimes it's multiple kids in a family. And the thing that I really, you know, focus on is how do we get to people like you before the child is injured? How do we talk about this? How can we get this information across in a world where this is really much more like a religion? We are born into this religion. We are baptized in this religion with a hepatitis B vaccine on the day we're born. 3 months, 6 months, perpetually a part of this, you know, religious sacrifice, if you will. I mean, you know, since I'd never gotten a vaccine, when I made VAXXED, I remember I reached out to Jim Sears, who was the pediatrician on the doctors, and he's actually in the film. He has an amazing awakening moment when I show him what I've discovered in, you know, in that documentary. But I said, can I come into your practice and shoot babies getting vaccines? He's like, yeah, come on, you know, so just for some B-roll. And I'll never forget when I saw this little infant, I don't know, a month or two old, getting like, you know, there's like 2 in this arm, 2 in this arm. And then the nurse is like, this is the one that really gets them, like going into the leg. And she injects this thing into this baby's leg. And that, you know, that pain where they don't even make a noise for like 60 seconds, that just like lights up. His mouth is quivering until like no breath, until finally just this blood curdling scream, like lava had just been injected into his veins. And I was like, I can't believe people return after watching that one time. Like, what is it that has made this okay? But it really, you know, I guess to just sort of finish it up, you can ask whatever questions. I really think it's important that people realize that this movement is built on people that were injured by vaccines. There is now a growing body. I would say a huge part of this medical freedom movement are now actual anti-vaxxers, people that listened to your story and others like it and said, you know what, I don't want to make that mistake. I trust you. I believe you. There's something that rings true. So I think there is a growing body of people that we are getting to now that are deciding to make a different choice. All of the polls show that more and more people, I think we've gone from 3% unvaccinated kids when I started this 10 years ago to now we're getting above 10%. So that's a huge growth rate in 10 years, but, and I'm proud of it. I know there's people, there's a really funny Instagram right now that I put out. My social media team just said, this thing's going viral. I was putting in a bathroom in my daughter's bathroom this week and got a call from a reporter who started grilling me, and my wife just decided to shoot it on a phone. But if you go to @Bigtree on Instagram, and I'm answering all this, like, she's like, so you want your kids to have an infectious disease? I was like, yeah, I do. I mean, I really, if they're going to get an infection, one of the diseases on this planet, I want it to happen naturally. I don't want it injected. I don't want it including a bunch of adjuvants and aluminum and polysorbate 80 and aborted fetal DNA and monkey kidney cells and hamsters. And I just don't want all that. And my kids saw me, call me crazy. We're doing this a different way. So
we just watched that.
We watched, I showed that to her this morning. I reshared it. No, I think what you're doing and what Vax, you're saying that it was almost 10 years ago. That's wild because my timeline was almost 10 years. And the fact that you guys were starting what you were doing and really getting momentum with what you're doing when I was starting to go down that rabbit hole is a great testimony. And so I think the more that we can have these conversations and moms can share their stories. I know that I've had two types of people I've interacted with on social media. And when you have a bigger following and you're loud and you're bold, you get all the things. And so I have the people that just go off on me and say vile, nasty, hurtful, disgusting things, and their minds are so closed. And 10 years ago I would cry at those. Now they roll right off like I'm waterproof. It doesn't even faze me. But then there's the other side. And I think that's what keeps moms like me going. It's the moms that are asking questions and I'm sending them info and they're coming back to me saying, oh my gosh, because of you, I didn't vaccinate. Or because of you, I started asking questions. And so I think that's why we keep doing what we're doing. That's why I keep going. And I'm so passionate that having this conversation with you made me start out with tears because it was this literally, my daughter being injured changed the trajectory of my entire life. And so now, and we'll get into some of this, with an inconvenient study and some of what was found, but that almost 10-year-old who was injured has never been on an antibiotic. She doesn't go to the doctor. It's a true testament when you look at, like, in my family, my older kids I was so sick at how many antibiotics I saw that my older daughter was on. And so I think that that's really important. And we love that we can have these conversations and that, we reached out to your team and asked you to come on and you were like, absolutely. And we just have to keep sharing. I know that me sharing my story online led to April going down into her story, which she can share. She was one who thought I was crazy at first, and I love that.
Well, yeah, she was a lot. Like, I'm just being honest. Like, she didn't make me go, I don't want to vaccinate. I was like, that woman's absolutely insane, and she made me keep vaccinating, to be honest. Because I was like, she sounds so crazy that I don't believe what she's saying, to be honest. And I was still friends with her because I'm not a judgy person like that. I honor everyone's medical freedom. But I was never, she was like getting flu shots and crazy stuff before I've never been that person. I've always been eat a cleaner lifestyle. I've always been that person, but I still vaccinated, which is weird because I was more natural in everything else than vaccines. And I always had a discernment go off when my kid would get a vaccine for the exact reason you just said.
Yeah.
And I would ask the doctor questions like, well, are your kids vaccinated? Well, yeah, they are. Because I was like, in the back of my head, my one crazy friend says, we shouldn't do this. So let me just ask. But I kept going because they told me I should. And that's where I think it goes to, I was like, I'm not a doctor and I don't have all the time in the world to do the research that I needed to or should have. My mistake. Because what she was showing me was like textbooks and documentaries. And at that time, I'm living the American dream. I'm working 80, 90 hours a week.
Yeah.
Barely seeing my children. How am I supposed to have this time? So finally, I started separating. After my second kid had major health issues, I started waking up. I'm like, okay. Then I got major health issues, got breast implant illness and all these crazy things that they told me weren't real. So when they were telling me that wasn't real, I'm like, okay, wait. If they're saying that's not real, what else is not real? And then I started paying attention. And then me and Brandy started a business. I had already stopped vaccinating, but I didn't have the time to do the research. I know it's a shame. I hate that I even say that out loud, but I didn't have the time it took for me to feel very confident. So I was like, I'm going to pause these vaccines. I'm starting to feel weird, but maybe I'll get them later. We opened a business and she's giving me all this data entry to put into the website. I'm sobbing. I'm watching all your documentaries. I'm reading inserts. I'm watching. And then An Inconvenient Study came in shortly after that, or not shortly, but close to after that. And I was like sobbing and crying because I'm like, all my son's issues were my fault. All these things were my fault. She told me I didn't listen. So it was like one of those moments where I still feel really terrible that the fact that I could have stopped and didn't. But we're so programmed. We're like you just said, it's like a religion. We are programmed into believing that that's just what you do. And it doesn't matter that you feel uncomfortable about it because he knows more than you do.
Yeah. I mean, it's, and that's what a religion does, right? Don't question it. Have faith. Even though it doesn't make sense. Forget about reading. Don't do any investigation. Don't look into this yourself. In fact, you're stupid. That's what was amazing during COVID was You're an
Right.
idiot if you do your own investigation. You're smart if you just trust the experts. I mean, it like defied everything we learned when we were kids, right? There's no such thing as a stupid question. Suddenly the
Right.
world was, oh no, there is a stupid question. Any question about a vaccine is a stupid question. Don't ask it. Don't go near it. Trust us. Trust us. And, you talk about like, those people that yell at you or bully you, I think that that's one of the things that has really shifted. And I think it is starting to affect. I talked to, like, as you can see in that Instagram, I'll talk to any reporter and they are slowly, even though that one's pretty aggressive, they're having a more and more difficult time because we now are making the reasonable argument. We're the ones that are providing documents and backing up our position. We're calmly discussing it. And it's now the pro-vaccine side that has become the emotional side of this argument, yelling, screaming, kicking people out of their practice for asking questions, and not supporting anything they have to say with any data. I just watched the other day Paul Offit, who's a big vaccine shill. He's made a fortune off of his own rotavirus vaccine. He's one of the big people they tout out there, goes out and does press. And he was being interviewed by a podcaster saying, why don't you debate Robert Kennedy Jr.? He's like, I'll tell you why. I detest that man so much. I just don't think I can handle it. If I was on a stage, I would be so angry I wouldn't be able to have that debate. And I just thought, wow, man. I mean, honestly, and maybe people buy that perspective or that idea, but think about it. Is there anything that we're experts at? Like, we're all experts in whatever we do in life, whether we're a computer technician, you name it. But if someone was challenging our expertise, would you really be so angry you couldn't sit in a room with that person? You would love that moment. You would love the moment and opportunity to school that person. Even better, are you going to roll cameras on that? Let me just put this person in their place. Paul Offit can't do that because he has no science. There's no, and that's what my films have proved. This was my 10 years of investigation. And I hope there's someone watching right now that, is watching and thinking, I haven't listened to this. And I know it is really hard to hear this, but there is no science. And it's not that your doctor, you can ask your doctor. And I want to also say this. People say, oh, doctors aren't even giving it to their kids. They're just, they know better. They don't. In fact, I would say even the people developing these vaccines, they believe in it. So don't think that it's, I don't like it when people say they don't do it to themselves. They absolutely are doing it to themselves. They're doing it to their children. So that's not where to look. They just have no idea. What they don't ever do is read the actual studies that, the vaccines went through, the trials that they went through, or the lack of safety trials, which is what we've proved. Not a single vaccine has ever been through a safety trial. And that means using a saline placebo as a control group. Never happened. And I'm starting to say to the media, because I'll say, don't go and print. The experts say, Bigtree, it's misinformation. We're way past that now. This has been, 10 years of me saying it to the press, but now a year and a half of Robert Kennedy Jr. as HHS secretary saying it. And you guys keep screaming, the experts say it's not true, but not one of your papers has ever published a placebo-based trial. Should have happened by now. Should have been the New York Times front page. Here it is. All 16 vaccines and their trials that we give our kids and their placebo-based trials. Robert Kennedy Jr. is wrong. Let's impeach him. Bigtree is wrong. He should never be able to speak again. That will never happen because those trials do not exist. I have won lawsuits against the government of the United States on this. So I am so confident I'm right. And so now we're in a place where you're going to start hearing it change. As I know media, they will start changing the argument. And 10 years, 10 years from now, it'll be like, we never needed to do placebo-based trials because we use this other metrics, right? That's what we'll start hearing. But I just want to point out, they didn't start there. They started with, you're liars. We did those trials because they know those trials are the only ways to get the safety. There's another way. Why didn't they just start with that? And I'm telling you, the media will change. And we'll be so far down the road, they'll say, no, we always knew. They always said they didn't do the placebo trials. Just like, remember with COVID, they said, no, we said from the beginning it wasn't going to stop infection or transmission. Really? Because I got Rachel Maddow saying on television, it stops with you. If you get the vaccine, it stops with you.
Yep.
You don't spread to everyone else. You protect your neighbors. Joe Biden says it. Tony Fauci says it. Everyone said you will protect your neighbors if you get this vaccine. But look what media is great. This is why you've got to watch this.
Yes.
It's managed. It says it over and over again that even your pro-vaccine friends will say, oh, no, that's not true. They always said it would only protect disease. You've got to play the videos for them again and go, and it's like a glitch, they start glitching out. Like, wait a minute, something's wrong because their programming doesn't remember why they did this in the first place and what they were told. It's quite astounding how good our media is, I think, at hypnotizing us. I'm a huge
100%.
fan of Matthias Desmet and his work on his book, the Psychology of Totalitarianism. That really helped me understand what we were actually up against. Because we say, oh, they're brainwashed. No, they are actually hypnotized. And I don't think it's, when I was interviewing him, I said, so it's like they're hypnotized. He's like, no, it's not like they're hypnotized. They are hypnotized. And I do believe our friends and families, that especially ones that are still getting a COVID vaccine at this point, with thousands of studies showing how horrific those things are, those people, God love them. They have their place in this world, and I'm thankful for them. They're helping tell this story. But we are capable of being hypnotized by our television sets, and you can watch it over time.
We actually experienced that
100%.
in real time. USA Today reached out to us last year when we filmed a documentary with USA Today that RFK was in it, and they came out here and filmed us. And the whole narrative was supposed to be understanding the crunchy moms, why we're questioning vaccines. But when it came out, it was very much like trying to make us look like the crazy moms.
Yeah.
And he kept saying, we don't trust the science. And we were pushing back that the science doesn't exist. And we talked about you and your study in the documentary.
Oh, yeah. He had to go research it before he started the documentary. He's like, hang on. He went and go watch the thing. He was like yelling at us and bullying us, and we weren't backing down, but it was ruthless.
And I told her, any PR is good PR. The fact that the conversation is happening on USA Today, even if they're not framing us in a way that we love, that's okay. Yep. It's happening, and it's going to reach the mom it's meant to reach.
Yep.
I agree. Completely agree with that. That's been my approach from the beginning. When Vax came out, I think that was the big shift that I made in the movement. Was everyone had stopped talking to the press. All of the summits and conferences they were having on vaccine injury, they were locking the press out. And even Bobby, who was famous in the movement at the moment, really wasn't talking to the press. And I was like, what are you guys doing? Like, how do you expect to change this conversation? And they said, well, the press just takes us out of context. They even, for Andy Wakefield, who was a part of Making Vax, he's like, they'll just straight up, cut and paste and change what you've said. And I said, we're going to take a different approach. I'm going to talk to every camera there is. In fact, I want to be attacked. I want the most horrific headlines you've ever seen, which VAXXED totally achieved that. Getting kicked out of Tribeca Film Festival was like a gift, manna from heaven. And I ran on negative press. I ran on, there are people out there that just think they're all alone thinking like this. I will at least get to them and let them know that there's someone else that, it's like that voice at the end of the world, the Armageddon, where you're pinging a radio and suddenly a voice, you hear it. That's what I felt like this was. And I was sure that these numbers were gigantic, and they are. And I think that An Inconvenient Study shows that. We are no longer in some rare incident moment. What we are seeing is that vaccine injury is worse than 1 in 2 kids. It's more than 50%. And that should be, if you lived in a real world, that should be the biggest headline we have ever read. And, I don't know if we'll ever see it. I don't know, because the pharmaceutical industry is so well invested in media. I don't know if we'll see it in the mainstream, but more and more parents are waking up to that reality.
Thank goodness.
They really are. So let's talk about An Inconvenient Study.
Yeah.
And so I was really excited when that came out. Like I said, I've seen all the VAXXED. I saw VAX3 in theaters in Sarasota, and I think I saw 2 in theaters also. But let's talk about the study, because it was presented that the information was going to be released no matter what, and that's not what happened. And so we just love to hear, the behind the scenes. Obviously, we've watched it and we've shared it, and we'll put it in the show notes and things here. But like going into that dinner, you know, what was going through your head knowing that he wasn't going to release the study?
Well, you know, I've been asked this question. For anyone, let's just, in case someone's watching and doesn't know, I challenged the head of infectious disease at Henry Ford Health, Dr. Marcus Zerbos. We had a mutual friend that set up a dinner when I was traveling the country with VAXXED back in 2016. So nice guy. I mean, I really do. And Dr. Marcus Zerbos is a nice guy. I think it's unfortunate how this whole thing has had to sort of roll out because of the circumstances. But you know, he sat with me at dinner, which he didn't have to do. He said, I watched VAXXED, which he didn't have to do. And he said, you know, the movie's very compelling. He says, but you keep saying something as you're traveling this country. I see your YouTube videos that I take offense to. You keep saying they've never done the proper studies to establish that vaccines are safe. He said, so I sit on the biggest databases in the world, and I went and did my research before I had this dinner so I could show you the evidence of safety. And he said, and I'm shocked that I have to sit across from you at this table and tell you you're right. That was really, again, he didn't have to do that. I mean, I want to point out the things that make him, you know, unique in that he didn't lie. He didn't cover up his position. He admitted we have a very weak position. Now, he said, now that doesn't mean that vaccines aren't safe. It just means we can't say that they're safe scientifically. I said, and yet you do on every news program. There is 24 hours a day, and that is my problem. And I think that they are causing more injuries than we realize. He's like, well, I don't know what I can do for you, Del. I was like, well, how about this? Would you ever do a comparative study looking at health outcomes of vaccinated and unvaccinated kids? And he agreed to do that study. So the long and short of it took me 4 years to actually, you know, convince him to follow through, which he did in 2020. And as you pointed out, I only had one rule. I was like, look, I'm going to have no control over this study. You do it the way you see fit. But you know, this is a gentleman's bet, essentially. You're going to try to prove that vaccines are obviously making kids healthier. Whatever you find, publish it. He says, I'll publish it no matter what. And then he refused to publish it when it was done. And I remember calling him and I said, Dr. Zerbos, why aren't you publishing this? And he's like, Del, when I agreed to do this study, I was not making agreement to end the childhood vaccine program. And I said, what do you mean end the vaccine program? This study's that bad? He said, it is that bad. And he didn't know what to do about it. So 2 years later, he still was refusing. So I went to dinner, as you pointed out. In the heart of the movie, I brought hidden cameras and recording equipment because I wanted him to explain what was going on. And I didn't know if I would ever use the footage, but I just thought, you know, this is a moment where the world might be able to hear what's really going on here. So when I went to that dinner, it's funny, I did a podcast with Mike Rowe, who I love, you know, from Dirty Jobs, great guy. And, you know, he asked me the same thing, but he was like, you know, you're interviewing this guy. He's like, it's like the movie. He's like, it's like a Greek tragedy. Like I found it so compelling. Like I feel bad for this guy. I hate this guy. I'm angry that he's so callously, you know, throwing away millions of children's lives, maybe. But then you're in there recording him, and I feel bad. Like, why aren't you telling him the truth? So you're a liar. Like, you know, like my girl, like really put it out there. And he's like, but did you feel like you got the goods? And this is what people ask me. Did you feel like when you walked away that you had, you know, you got what you needed? And the truth was, I had no idea what I recorded. I was so passionately, and if you watch it, just trying to convince him to publish it. That's all I really wanted from that dinner. There was nothing that this footage would do that would be more important than just getting that study out to the public so you can see all the different ways I'm trying to be nice. I'm using guilt. I'm using pressure. And so I left that dinner feeling like I'd failed. I had failed to convince him that the right thing to do was to publish the study. And it was really dead in the water. There was no way for me to publish the study. And if I did publish it, it would just be Del Bigtree's anti-vax study, which is not what it was. It's the exact opposite. It's like one of the most pro-vaccine institutions and a guy who in the hidden camera footage admits himself. And I have to be careful saying this. I have to say it's what he says because Henry Ford Health is glowering and watching over us, wanting to bring a defamation case, wanting me to overstep and state more than what this is. So let me be perfectly clear. This study was never published. Dr. Zervo says the reason he didn't publish it was because it'd be the end of his career, that he would be finished, and it'd be the end of his legacy. That's what he says, not me. So you can tell, and you can see him in this film. He's very afraid. He's afraid of what this could lead to. Yet when I ask him, is it a good study? Is it important? Do you stand by the findings? Yes, yes. And I think one of the most important questions in any other climate, right? That climate that you described, where this isn't a religious belief, where you're not attacked for asking a question, where it's just a science inquiry. In any other climate, would you have published this as is? He said, I would publish it as it is. And I think that says it all. And so we have this very unique, I think the film is a very unique experience. I don't know, like I've watched some of James O'Keefe, who I credit with even having the idea. It's not my style of journalism. This is the only time I've ever really recorded somebody without them knowing, but the length of it. I mean, I think it's 20 or 30 minutes of footage. Like, you watch a conversation thoroughly. It's just fascinating. And so I think this is the most powerful and important study there is, because it's being done by someone you can tell did the study to prove the anti-vaxxers wrong, and instead probably prove them right in the most dynamic and horrifying study that's ever been done. And that truly is the scientific method, right? This is my biggest beef with science as it exists today. Science is not supposed to scream heretic at everyone that breaks ranks from the consensus and says, I have a different view, or I've learned something. Now, of course, we've been doing it since we threw Galileo under house arrest for saying that the Earth wasn't the center of the universe. We've never evolved in our ability to handle that the science is changing around us. But the scientific method, actually, by definition, demands that everybody step forward that believes that they can undo a hypothesis or even a theory. If there's a theory that exists out there, and say, I can scientifically prove that it's wrong, then that idea is supposed to move to the top of the list and be addressed immediately with excitement, right? You have to remember, science came in at the time where we were just religions. We had different religions. We were tired of having to have faith in God, faith that the sun would return, because we didn't know that the earth was spinning. I mean, it's amazing to look at Anasazi ruins, and they have rituals praying that the sun comes back, right? That level of humility and, vulnerability, we were tired of it. We wanted to be able to prove the things that were happening, which meant we developed a set of rules. So in order to avoid it ever being a religion again, no faith allowed here, no faith. And then even an idea like Ptolemaic concept of a flat earth, or that we are the center of the universe, if someone comes forward and says, I have evidence that is not true, then that evidence has to be looked at. And here we are. Now their sun is the center of the universe, but it took a long time for science to admit that. But it's supposed to take on that question. When it screams heretic, when it shuts down the LinkedIn channel of Dr. Robert Malone, the inventor of the mRNA technology, who's saying, don't take this product that I invented, now you have a problem. Now you have science acting like a religion. When it screams that Del Bigtree and Robert Kennedy Jr., are spreading misinformation, but never shows you a placebo-based trial to prove that he's lying, that's a problem. The scientific method demands evidence, not expert opinion. It demands evidence. And so we've fallen into this place where we're treating experts like religious leaders, like priests, or like cardinals, or even the Pope. I would say Tony Fauci is like the Pope. And so even he said it, if you question me, you are questioning science itself. And then what happens? Once this COVID is all over, he gets in front of the Congress and he admits, the social distancing, 6-foot distance rule, that just kind of appeared. We just made that up. The science behind masks, we don't really have any science that showed that the mask could stop a virus particle as small as COVID. And so you realize that science has become a religion, and that is what has to end immediately. And it's why we're experiencing what we are. Like I said, any expert in their field would love a challenge from a child or a mom or another adult that is misinformed. They would love to sit and give you all that information. But when you challenge your pediatrician now, they don't show up with science and studies and placebo-based trials. They yell at you, tell you to stop asking those questions. And if you continue, you're going to be kicked out of the practice. I would say that is bullying. And the American Academy of Pediatrics is now teaching its pediatricians to be bullies, not teaching them the science, not teaching them the evidence that would be convincing for any parent to just see it. They don't have that. All they have is the ability to bully us. And I would say go back to your school days. When was the bully ever the valedictorian of the school? When was the bully ever the smartest kid in the class? The bully is the one that doesn't have any evidence for what they're doing. And that's what they're so frustrated about. And that's why they're attacking. And now mainstream medicine is on attack. It's not providing science. It's providing rhetoric and attack and demeaning and calling us stupid. That means its days are numbered because we are providing the science. An Inconvenient Study is the science now. And as I've said, we are no longer in any position. I say this to every reporter. You are no longer on some moral or ethical high ground when you stand with the scientific consensus on vaccines, because we proved you've never done a safety study. So that means the only way to figure out what's actually going on with vaccines now is a retrospective study. We skipped all the science that should have been done. Not my fault. That's the fault of the pharmaceutical industry. And so now it is my retrospective study against yours. And guess what? You can't provide one single retrospective study that shows that vaccinated kids, when compared to unvaccinated, are healthier. That is the statement everyone now needs to make. We should be demanding that the Henry Ford study at the Center of an Inconvenient Study be reproduced in every database in the world. And unless someone in the world can show us a comparative study where the vaccinated are healthier and open up that data so that science can make sure you didn't manipulate it, and I would say the same thing to Henry Ford, open up that data. If somehow Dr. Zervos was a hidden anti-vaxxer and there's some other way to see the science, then open up that science to the world. Let us all look at it. But we are in a crisis now for science, because what we are seeing in the Henry Ford study is the conclusion: 2.5 times more likely a child is to have a chronic disease the rest of their lives, to be sick their entire lives. They're 2.5 times more likely than if they had not received a vaccine. They're 6 times more likely to have a neurodevelopmental disorder if they were vaccinated compared to the unvaccinated kids, and 6 times more likely to have an autoimmune disease. And if you looked at the most shocking part of the study, within 10 years, when they looked at the time to date, comparison, after 10 years, a vaccinated child has a 57% likelihood. So better than 50% chance that they are going to have a chronic disease. And the unvaccinated, there's a 17% chance. That is astronomical. It doesn't, as I've said in the movie, it's one study. It does not prove unequivocally that the vaccines are causing it. But it is one of the greatest red flags we've ever seen and demands more science immediately. And what's even more alarming is the 10 to 12 other studies that have been similar, made the same comparisons, are coming to nearly the exact same conclusions. As I've said, every one of them showing the vaccinated are sicker than the unvaccinated. So we are clearly going through a process, if we're to look at these studies, that is making our children sicker, not healthier. That should be a full stop understanding around the world, and an immediate body of science needs to be done, not to try and defend against it, but to see, can you prove it a different way? Can you prove that the vaccinated kids are healthier? So that's it.
I
think that's what's so frustrating about it, is it's like there's something causing our kids to be sicker than they've ever been before. There's something there, right? Like, we can all agree to that. Whether you're pro-vaccine, anti-vaccine, something's wrong. And so I think that's the heart of it right there, is that we should be asking and be allowed to be asking and doing all the studies. Let's eliminate every possible thing it could be. If we're wrong and it's not the vaccines, prove it. If it's heavy metals, prove it. If it's this, if it's food, whatever it might be, like we should be talking about everything. I know that VAXXED made me feel as a we did type mom. I did all the right things. Vax made me feel like I wasn't alone. It connected me to parents whose stories were even more heartbreaking than mine, like Christopher Bunch and Colton Barrett. And there's so many kids out there like that. And then An Inconvenient Study validated everything that I've learned and I've talked about and I've felt and I've been ridiculed for. And so, yes, we need to be asking these questions. Do you think we'll ever see that study released?
I was just going to say, when they say it's flawed, what is flawed about it? They're trying to tell everybody that it's a flawed study now.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's what they would do, but I would say this, right? It's the Henry Ford data. It's some of the best data you will ever see. It's not just like, first of all, it's only children in the Henry Ford health system, including their insurance system. So these kids, it's all of their data. So they are tracked, even if they went to a doctor in a different state or happened at a non-Henry Ford health hospital, because they're also the insurer. That insurance picks up the ICD-10 codes. So whatever happened in that hospital, this is better data than even HHS has. So it's 20,000 kids born into the Henry Ford health system. So they said, one of the comments they've said in their cease and desist letter was the data is flawed. Well, what's flawed about it? It's your data. Are you saying there's a flaw in how you collect your data?
Right.
So no explanation there. I don't understand what that would possibly mean. And certainly if it's a flaw in how you converted it over, that could be fixed. And then you say the methodology of the study, had issues. Why didn't Henry Ford say, hey, this is a great opportunity, Dr. Zerbos. Thanks for taking this on. This is an opportunity to really get to the bottom of this and prove to the anti-vaxxers that the vaccinated are really healthier. So we're going to come in and readjust this study. We're going to fix the data that we're saying is flawed because it's our data. And we're going to fix the flaws in the study and account for those. But when you look at the study, Zerbos already did that. He does all of these tests to say, well, he makes them, comes up with the most conservative way to evaluate the study. He does test on the issues that Henry Ford said weren't done. So it's almost like he took their notes, did readjust the study, and this is my opinion, I believe it's because the data is so damning for the vaccinated, they've just said you can't publish it and it's not going anywhere, and we're going to say it's a flawed study. What's flawed about it is the vaccines themselves, and they don't want to admit that. And so, I don't know what to say. Like, people will say, if you look at it online, of course, they're great at SEO and Google's in on it. This is an unpublished study. Yeah, okay, fine. But what are the odds that someone like me that made vax, so go ahead, call me anti-vaccine if you will. So an anti-vaccine dude talks to a head scientist that is staunchly pro-vaccine at a pro-vaccine institute. I say, compare health outcomes of vaccinated and unvaccinated, do it however you want. And that study ends up proving me right. I mean, what are the odds of that happening? It's really, I guess because it's a religion, we want to believe in this God. We want to believe in this religion, and we don't want to face the music. But it's time to do it because our kids, 54% of them are chronically ill now in America. It's the sickest nation in the world. It's the sickest generation of children we've ever seen in this country. So I don't know. If I was a pediatrician, I'd be embarrassed. If I was a former health secretary, oh, Robert Kennedy Jr. is not a doctor. Yeah, they were mostly all lawyers. There's only been 2 doctors the entire time. But every other HHS secretary, they're responsible for the greatest decline in human health. We had 12%, about 12.8% chronic disease in the 1980s, just 40 years ago, to now over 54%. So 40% decline. I mean, what is that, 400 times? I don't know. I mean, I'm like shooting at the math here, but the greatest decline in human health has been recorded in the last 40 years in America. So that technically is the fault of everyone at the CDC and the FDA and the NIH and HHS for the last 40 years, because whatever it is, and this is the truth, as you pointed out, I've sort of long-windedly agreeing with you completely. It has to be an environmental toxin because our genes do not mutate or evolve this quickly. In 40 years, you do not see our immune system suddenly attacking our own bodies. We are having a toxic event. Our kids are toxic. And there's only, the EPA has done studies on this. There's only really a handful of things it could be because it starts in the 1980s. The introduction of plastics, really, the use of it, aluminum becomes we become aluminum society. You've got, and by the way, aluminum's being injected in the vaccines, which I think is a huge part of this. You've got forever chemicals that are in our nonstick pans, our flame retardants in our babies' clothing and some of the blankets we were using, and then vaccinations. All of those things skyrocketed at the same time. So maybe it's not vaccines, but if it's sort of like a lineup, right? If you're going to line up, if you've got a bunch of culprits and there's one that refuses, is kicking and punching every cop and blocking the door, will not let themselves be put in that lineup, screaming bloody murder, how could you? This is that would be the one I'd be looking at the closest, right?
Yeah.
And it's certainly, and look at what's happened with Robert Kennedy Jr. He's under attack by the American Academy of Pediatrics for reducing our schedule to the same schedule being used in Europe and Denmark and Germany. So it's working for them. What would be the big crisis? They're trying to stop him, and they're going to try and impeach him, guaranteed. I'm not sure how this next election will go. They need him out of there. Why? Because he's investigating forever chemicals. What is the health outcomes? He's investigating vaccines. As American citizens, we should be excited, whether we agree with the guy or not, be excited that they are looking at every single possible contaminant that's in our environment, the pesticides and herbicides on our food.
Yep.
And meanwhile, what are we watching? We are not watching Bayer Monsanto when it comes to, glyphosate. They're not providing science to prove that it's safe because they can't. In fact, the only study that said it was safe has just been retracted. They're not changing the product or developing a safer product. They're going to the government the same way the vaccine industry did and said, we want liability protection, or we are going to pull our herbicide and destroy your farms across this nation. They're blackmailing Donald Trump. This is exactly what happened with the pharmaceutical industry. That is not what you do when your product is healthy and safe. It's not what you do when you can make better products or want to evolve. So all I can say is we should want someone that is going to investigate every single product there is, that does not care how much money the industry of that, whether it's a chemical company, a drug company, a agricultural company, a frying pan company, whatever it is, we should not want government agencies that care what the industry is saying. We want total objectivity, and we have that in Robert Kennedy. And lastly, I want to make this point. They're going to scream that Robert Kennedy Jr. has a bias. This is what Paul Offit is saying. This is what all of pharma is saying, that his bias is going to produce science that shows that vaccines are dangerous. This is what they're afraid of. And they've just described exactly our argument. My argument is that there's never been balance in the science that's done on this product. Are you saying, and I've said this to people, are you saying that whoever's conducting the studies, that bias can affect the outcomes? Absolutely, they'll say, Robert Kennedy Jr. is dangerous. Okay, well, the bias that has done all of the science so far is the pharmaceutical industry, everyone that read its textbooks that it created, and the universities that it has funded. We have tons of doctors and scientists that do question this, and they are attacked and their license is taken away for simply asking the question. That means we have a problem. I believe science can be biased, and right now, only cheerleaders for vaccines have been doing the science. I want people to think about a crash test on your car. Would you rather have someone that hates Ford doing that crash test, is always driven a Chevy, or would you prefer a, lifelong Ford, zealot and has Ford posters all over their walls? When you see 5-star safety rating, would you trust the guy that always loved Ford? Or if it was a Chevy lover that says, hey, I have to admit it, 5-star safety rating on that car, now I know it's safe. What I've just described is the scientific method. And I did it with I did it it's funny, Henry Ford Medical Center, but that's what I did. I didn't want, one of these supposed anti-vaccine scientists that have already done these unvaccinated studies. And it's not that they're not credible. I think they've done a great job. But I said, if we're ever going to prove this, we need the other side. We need essentially our enemy, if you will, to do the science. And I trusted it. And so many people have been telling me, Del, don't ever trust the CDC to do a vax versus unvax study. They'll manipulate it. And I said, I don't think you can, because I think they would have done it by now. And I'm sure they haven't. I think they've tried to do that. And Henry Ford just proved my point. We handed this job to the most pro-vaccine institution, and they were incapable of doing anything except show that vaccines are dangerous. That is how the scientific method is supposed to work. And I will say this. Robert Kennedy Jr. is going to attempt to do some vaccinated versus unvaccinated studies if he's not impeached or removed from that job before he gets the chance. And sure, they will say, well, it's because Robert Kennedy Jr. that the outcomes are thus. And I'm fine with that. I will say, then what we have proved, bias matters. Now, can we all come to the table? You bring your scientists, we bring ours, and let's come up with a study protocol that we could all agree would be how this science should be done. It's, by the way, how Bobby's going to do it anyway. He is reaching out to both sides, but whatever. Everyone has the right to challenge. But what we want as citizens is not a bias or a religion telling us something is safe. Science has now got to prove it's safe, and it's never done it. It has never looked at the long-term safety of one vaccine, let alone the now 72 vaccines that our children are being injected with by the time they're 18 years old. We should celebrate the anti-vaxxers. It's what I say, in this interview. We should celebrate those kids that, fine, you're taking on a risk of the real infection. Because once that kid gets through the, 5 to 10 days of that infection, they are going to be immune for life. They are going to be pillars of herd immunity. You want herd immunity on this planet. No one has better immunity than someone that has had the real infection. The vaccinated, I'm fine if you want to vaccinate and try to get your immunity that way. But there's a reason you're getting 3 shots, 5 shots, 7 shots, 10 COVID shots, because it's an inferior form of immunity. And in many times, you're not even stopping the infection like COVID. So you're not even protecting other kids. Whereas our unvaccinated kids, sure, there's a week or maybe even 2 where they have an infection. Most likely they're sick and they're home, so they're not bothering anybody. But when those 2 weeks are over, they're going to protect kids for the next 80 years of their lives. It's time to start celebrating those kids and those parents for making that choice.
Absolutely.
I love that. I think something so powerful, and I'm we're wrapping up on that note. If you talk to the other side, it's you have to vaccinate. You're awful if you don't, yada, yada, yada. But if you talk to people on, let's say, our side, it's, hey, we care about informed consent. We care about medical freedom. We care about you making your choices. I know that's been a big one for me. Like, I'm loud and I've softened my tone. I was really loud in COVID, which is why she thought I was so crazy.
No, COVID, I was already awake, but yeah, before that.
But I think it's important to point out that when you see parents out there sharing their stories, which is something that was so powerful about Vax, we don't get anything positive out of sharing our children's vaccine injury stories. It's actually quite the opposite. We get a lot of hate and we get a lot of negativity, but we're sharing those because it's like, hey, we went through this awful thing. And if we can share our story and help your child not have to go through what our child did, then we're going to do it. And so I think it's really important to note that we have these conversations so you can make an informed decision. And if you sat through this almost hour-long interview and you watch this and you went and watched the documentaries and you read the inserts, and we have 10 years of, info that we've put together that we have housed in the community. If you go truly do all the research and you come back and say, you know what, I think getting vaccinated is still the right choice for my family, that's great. That is your choice. And we support you. We just want to put the info out there. And so I think that's a big point I want to make. Like, I don't want someone to listen to this and be like, oh my gosh, they're just pushing their side. No, we're pushing the side of being able to choose. And if you want to vaccinate your child or you want to go get a vaccine for yourself, we just want to make sure they're as safe as possible. And that's the argument.
I agree.
I want to simplify this argument as much as I can because, first of all, an anti-vaxxer, by definition, if you look it up in Webster's now, they changed it. But it's anyone that wants to even delay a vaccine or stray from the recommended schedule, you are now an anti-vaxxer. So it's not someone that avoids every single vaccine, simply thinking for yourself, delaying your vaccine, saying, maybe I don't need a Hep B vaccine on day 1 of life because I don't have hepatitis B as a mother. I've already been tested. This is a sexually transmitted disease my child cannot get unless they're sharing heroin needles or sleeping with prostitutes. So hopefully that never happens, but it's not happening in the first couple of years of their lives.
Right.
The moment you think like that, by the way, you have just become an anti-vaxxer by definition. I also want to point out that 90% of the people that are now eligible for a COVID vaccine, not everybody, 9% of those who already received all the other vaccines are now not getting the next recommended booster shot. They are now anti-vaxxers. They are now delaying a schedule. They are now leaving the recommended number and recommended doses. And so what I would say to everyone, and this is the fight that I'm involved in and why I work so hard at it. Do you believe that 90%, meaning you and your children, should be forced by the government of the United States to take a booster shot of COVID every time it's available, which really now we know every 15 weeks that vaccine loses its efficacy and now makes you more likely to develop. It increases your risk of COVID. So if they were really going to do what's right, they need to give you that vaccine every single 15 weeks.
Dang.
Do you think the government should be allowed to force that on you? Because that is the future. That is what the pharmaceutical industry lobby is trying to achieve. It's what they want. And so when you are thinking about this movement, you have to just say to yourself, hold on. You have to say to yourself, do I want the right to choose? Do I want my doctor to have a direct relationship with me that consults me on my beliefs, my feelings, on the results that I've had with other vaccines, on what my kids' reactions have been? Not so good. I want to spread them out, or I don't think I want to do that vaccine again. Should that be your right, or does the government own your body and the government own your child? That is what the pharmaceutical industry believes. That's what the American Academy of Pediatrics believes, is that your body is not your choice. Your child's body is not your choice. If you want choice, then join all of us in fighting for medical freedom. And I don't care if you get 71 of the 72 vaccines or spread them out. You have the right to decide what goes into your body. And if you do not have that right, your rights have been reduced to the same exact rights as a farm animal. And that is why I believe this is the biggest issue in a country that calls itself free.
I agree with
Dang.
that so much. I met with an RN yesterday. She's a friend of mine. And so by definition, she's now an anti-vaxxer by what you said, because all she simply said was, well, I asked my doctor if I could split the vaccines. I said, you absolutely can, but you can't split a combo vaccine. And she's like, well, what do you mean? They told me I could split the vaccines. And she could not wrap her head around the fact that I'm like, yes, you could split up those individual vaccinations, but you cannot split up the MMR vaccine,
Correct.
which is the one that kind of causes a little bit of issues because, again, like you said, we have toxic overload everywhere. So our systems just tank out when you get something like that. And she could not wrap her head around it. And she's like, well, will my kids not be able to go to school? And this is what everyone thinks. And we shouldn't be in a world where your kid can't go to school because you don't want to be forcefully injected by 71 vaccines. So I could not agree with you more. That's mic drop.
Yep.
So to wrap this up, how you said, getting involved and fighting this fight, how can people get involved? We're going to put all your info in the show notes. I know that the loud ones like us share your story, get on social media, connect, but there's a lot of people that are not like us. Like I had coffee with my cousin last week and she doesn't vaccinate her kids, but she doesn't talk about it.
Right.
She doesn't want people to know that. So how can people on either side get involved through the work you're doing and your organization, your nonprofit, all the things?
Well, look, we do a weekly talk show, the HighWire.com every Thursday. You can stay tuned, share An Inconvenient Study. You can watch it for free at aninconvenientstudy.com. You can watch VAXXED. If you just type in VAXXED at the HighWire.com, we have it for free there. You can share that with your friends. Look, I get it. And, we live in some fairly scary times. At the moment, we're not being censored the way we were during the Biden administration. But I'm not going to say Trump is perfect. And whatever stay of execution we have right now, it's not going to last forever. But I believe that your right to free speech, your right to speak your mind and speak your truth is the most important right you have in America. And there will be no other rights if you lose your right to stand up for your other rights. And so, it's just like working out. The only muscles that you strengthen are the ones that you're using. I would really encourage people to start speaking more, using their voice more, because if we don't use our voice, we are going to lose it in this country. And then it will be a very quick ride to authoritarianism. I think the entire world is falling prey to that. We have a global authority now being driven by the WEF, the World Health Organization, the UN. They want to forcibly inject every adult, not every kid. Wait till you're lined up to your 72 vaccines. You think it's just your children, it's you too. So these are things that we have to stand up for. We've got to get out the vote. We've got to support Robert Kennedy Jr. And I would say right now, even if the vaccine issue seems a little confrontational, we're having a march on April 27th in Washington, D.C. in front of the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court is going to rule on whether to give liability protection to Monsanto and glyphosate and herbicides and pesticides. That will be the worst decision, if it goes that direction, that has ever happened in this country, second only to giving liability protection to vaccinations. So that is somewhere where it doesn't even have to be about vaccines. I think you should invite your liberal friends. I think they want pesticides and herbicides off of our food too. We got to stand up for what we believe in. We have the right to assemble. So I hope to see you April 27th in Washington, D.C. Just meet your peeps out there, man. It's so cool to be in these giant groups of people that are like-minded, standing for health and freedom. So those are the things you can do. And mostly I say pray every morning. Realize that you live in one of the most important times it's ever been. We are born at this time for a reason. This world needs us right now. Whether it's AI or vaccinations or, permanent herbicides that are causing cancer sprayed on all of our foods. All of those issues are coming to a head. We're on the verge of a dystopian potential nightmare, or the evolution of humanity and maybe the greatest time that's ever been. And it's going to be decided by this generation right here. It's not going to be left on our grandkids anymore. We are alive at that time. We are alive in the moment we could see the end of humanity in our lifetime, or we could see ourselves flourish. And so instead of complaining about the news that you're watching, thank God that you were born at this time. I think you were chosen at this time. You must have a special soul. You're here to make a difference in the world. So ask yourself how you make that difference. Listen to that quiet voice inside of you, and whatever it tells you to do, just say yes, and the world will be a better place.
I love that. That was the best place to end. I actually have Esther 4:14 tattooed on my wrist because of this journey that I've been on, really vaccines. And that's the verse, for such a time as this, being born for such a time as this. So that's a great place for us to end. Del, you're amazing. Like, you're just such a big voice in our community. It's for me, it's always been you and Bobby Kennedy. And so I just want to thank you for coming on and spending this time for us. And we've had a lot of parents asking us to tell you thank you for being such a voice for the voiceless, and we couldn't do this without you. So thank you so much. And as always, Crunchy Moms Unfiltered, where we have the real raw conversations that get us in trouble on social media.
Always. Hey guys, thank you for joining into today's episode. We want to take a minute to honor our sponsors. Today's sponsor is the School Rockwell School of Medicine, Holistic Medicine. And in every single episode, we like to honor each one of our sponsors so that you guys know exactly what we're doing in our everyday lives. You'll be able to find all of their information in our show notes on every single episode. So today, Brandy, share a little bit with us about Rockwell.
Okay, if you're like April and I, and you're the kind of person that's constantly asking, but what's actually causing this? You're going to love Rockwell School of Holistic Medicine. So we've partnered with them because that's exactly how we think. They teach root cause, not just symptom management. Like if you're learning how to actually understand the body order and interpret your own labs, and even look at the emotional and spiritual side of things too, because that's really important in your healing journey. This is something we're both personally doing. I'm currently taking their nutritional medicine course, and April is diving into spiritual medicine, which honestly tells you how comprehensive this school really is. Honestly, this isn't just if you want to build a business. This is for your home, your kids, your family, your everyday decisions. It's fully online, self-paced, and how medicine should have been taught. And just for our listeners, they're giving a $777 discount. So check the show notes for information and the coupon code.